We're live.
Hi, welcome to this chat today with myself, Ivan Walker, the Chief Technology Officer for the Being Path. And I'm happy to be here with you today, having a talk with a friend, colleague about kind of Blacks in technology, but also cybersecurity. So my friend here is Dr. Troy Nunnally.
Yeah, pleasure to be here.
Welcome. And so for today's discussion, oh, volume up, okay. And so for today's discussion, I just wanted to start off with, I think we've been so immersed in the Black technology scene that we forget how somewhat of an anomaly we are as Black men in technology and engineering. And I'd just like to start with you telling the audience, how did you venture into technology or engineering, or your background, education, to
Yeah.
becoming a doctor?
Yeah, so it all started, well, as childhood. So me and my brother, one day we was around 10 years old. I can remember this story vividly. And we was trying to build this go-kart. So we saw a friend who lived down in the neighborhood beside us, and he had this go-kart. It was souped out. It was created by his grandfather. And we saw it and we was like, oh man, this is awesome. We want to build something similar. So we went around the neighborhood just trying to figure out how can we build this go-kart. And so we took some old wood from the neighborhood and made that the frame of the go-kart. And then we also took some old brown concrete weights. Back then, the weight sets that you lift with was concrete instead of iron. And we took that and that was our wheels. And then we took the bar and that made our axle. Took some rope, that was our steering wheel, and we just took parts around the neighborhood to build this go-kart. And we made a go-kart, but it wasn't like the fancy go-kart that our uncle built. It was more like this rinky-dink thing, but we was proud of it because it was something we built, and we built something from nothing. And that was the start of our engineering journey. It was a seed planted that allowed us to be able to start nourishing it in high school. We started doing science fairs. We joined NSBE, which was actually sponsored by Georgia Tech at the time for our high school. Then we moved on to Tuskegee.
What is NSBE?
Oh yeah, so NSBE is the National Society of Black Engineers. And it is essentially a group that's sole purpose is to increase Black engineers in our society.
And it gives you a sense of community while you're going through this journey of other Black engineers who you have similar cultural experiences with that you can draw from.
Yeah, and NSBE is extremely powerful because it's hard to find, as you mentioned earlier, it's hard to find people that look like us, people that we have the same culture and the same background. And to be able to have folks like us moving forward together and seeing us work together allows us to nourish a better network between each other so that we can grow as a company and as people in general. Yeah.
And so you say you were getting into NSBE while you were an undergrad at where?
Yeah, so NSBE has a high school chapter. So I was the first president. So I'm born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia. Went to Westlake High School, which is the same high school that Cam Newton went to. And the first NSBE PCI chapter is a high school chapter for NSBE. So it's almost like this pipeline, this entryway into NSBE. And the first chapter was at Westlake High School. That first year I was the president. And I was the founding president of the high school NSBE PCI. And that allowed us to see different engineering tasks, different things, go to different schools, perform projects, and even go to the NSBE National Convention, which at that time, it was in Anaheim, California. So we flew all the way. It was the first time I ever been to California at the time. And, it was this convention of 10,000 people. And it was mind blowing because that allowed, as a person who went to an all Black school, all Black high school, we didn't have many role models in engineering. And that was the beginning. The guy who was over that at Georgia Tech, he was a Georgia Tech student at the time, was David Westner. I had to give him a shout out because he was one of the first mentors I had in the engineering program. And then Mr. Edward, he's also was one, he taught the engineering course at Westlake. And that was some of the beginning mentorships and really helped propel me to become an engineer, computer scientist in the field.
Okay. And so then you went from high school NASB to Tuskegee?
Yep, so I went to Tuskegee University, which is HBCU. Shout out to all my Tuskegee alumni. And I did electrical and computer engineering there and was specialized more so in control systems. So I wanted to be in robotics at the time. And so I did a lot of control systems, did an internship with 3M, which was in the manufacturing. And then from there, I went on to do Georgia Tech. So when I was a senior at Tuskegee, I was at an internship with 3M, but then one of the guys who's actually brought me into 3M at the time said, hey man, you may need to go to grad school. And he was like, hey, go to grad school. You have time to make money. Go ahead and get your graduate degree. And matter of fact, we will sponsor you at 3M. And that was the GEM Fellowship at the time.
Okay.
So the GEM Fellowship is a fellowship where us as engineers allows a company to sponsor you to go through grad school. And they'll pay your way essentially through grad school. And 3M was the company that sponsored me. So that was a blessing in disguise because I wasn't even planning to go to graduate school at the time.
Okay.
But then Gene Washington, who was at 3M, said, hey, go ahead and go.
And just for the audience, I clarified that control systems in your everyday life would be your thermostat on your air conditioner. How often does it come on? You set it at 72 degrees? Does it come on at 72.1 degrees? And you'd be really upset if Dr. Nunnally here did a bad control system and it turned on every single time you deviated from 72 degrees and burned your air conditioner out. So that's why that's such an important field of how do you interface the digital world with the physical world.
Yeah, and at that time, my specialty was more in manufacturing, like building postage stamps at the time. So building the manufacturing equipment to build a postage stamps, which is a lot of, like you said, controls, monitoring, the quality assurance, making sure that the postage stamp is a certain size and so forth. So we built that system at the time.
Okay, and so then you went from control systems kind of focused to, I know when I met you at Georgia Tech when I first arrived, you were in security.
Security, yep, network security. So that's a funny story. So I was trying to do control systems at the time, took a class, and didn't notice I didn't like it. It was linear control systems. So I was like, okay, I really don't like control systems. And this is in grad school. And from there, I took another class, network security, by Dr. John Copeland. And that class was so interesting and so intriguing to me that I ended up pursuing that as a PhD. One of the exercises of the class was at the very end of the class, he'd teach you all the concepts around network security, but then at the very end, we'll have a competition. And everybody will be sitting around this room, and every team is about a team of 4 or 5. They have a computer that they're working from. And inside this room, we're trying to hack other teams' computers. So it's this room of essentially ethical hackers trying to hack each other as well as protect their own computer. And that class was so intriguing to me that I ended up pursuing it even further and doing my PhD with it.
Okay, wow. Okay, a PhD in network security, or I guess another phrase is cybersecurity. Are those two terms synonymous or?
Yeah, it's synonymous. So the term cyber is anything that's digital. It's anything between that two devices, whether it's your computer, whether it's your mobile device like your cell phone, communicate to each other. So it's the act of communicating between two devices. And security is the idea that you want to keep it secure. You want to protect it from somebody else accessing the data. So in cybersecurity, that can be anything. So even in your car, you have computer systems
Okay.
where your steering wheel may talk to your electronic computer system. So if somebody were to hack that and lock up your steering wheel, that can be very, very dangerous.
It's interesting you bring that up. While I was at Tech, one of my summer research students was working on that exact thing of is there a security vulnerability in cars through the tire sensor?
Yep.
Because people don't think of those, and how do your pressure sensor in your car connect to your dashboard and tell you that? And is it even accurate? And then what if it isn't? What if someone tries to play tricks or sends data through that channel? You know, how do we keep that secure? So I remember that with him, and that was interesting to me.
Even your remote to unlock your cars. So a lot of people will kind of mimic the remote as a hacker, and I would mimic the remote to act as if I'm unlocking your car, and sometimes it may work. Or even because your car is also, your computer system is also connected to your starter system, like the ignition system, to start and stop your car. So if I'm driving down the highway and then somebody automatically just shuts your car off, that could be a very dangerous situation. So it's very important that we think about the security aspects of these devices that are interconnected.
Okay, and I think I saw a similar story to what you're saying about people doing the same thing with garage door openers and driving through neighborhoods, just seeing if they try random signals or frequencies for garage door remotes, if they could get someone's door to trigger and then break into the home that way. So pretty much cybersecurity entails any kind of communication across a network, and that network can be wireless or physical across wires. So, I mean, it seems like that pretty much covers the entire world.
It really does. So there are currently, as it states, 50 billion devices that are currently connected that's on the internet that could possibly be hacked. Just to put you in perspective, we only have 8 billion people. So it's more devices, 7 times more devices than people in the world. And we interact with dozens, if not hundreds, of interconnected devices every day. And each one of those devices could be hacked.
Okay. And so we talked about cybersecurity and the threats there and the hacking. If you had to think present day, about things like today, past week, what are some of the, I guess, most prominent opportunities or most impactful in a detrimental way do you see if someone were to hack that, say, for example, like the election? So what are, along that line, some things that could be hacked and the implications of it?
Yeah. So I'm gonna take a step back because so what does it mean to be hacked? And if I'm an attacker, the purpose of hacking is to get some type of gain from me attacking your device. So essentially, I can get gain through monetary, or I can get gain through power. That can be political power, that can be any type of power. Most people is monetary, but sometimes you will try to be an attacker just to get more political power to sway in your direction. So with the election, that's a form of that's a form of attack that you can do to, especially on social media and those type of platforms, to be able to sway in your directions, especially if it's a political power. So for example, with Georgia, we're currently in Georgia right now. We currently went blue. Joe Biden went blue currently, and it went blue by less than 15,000 votes. So if I was on the social media and I just kind of threw as an attacker, make a fake account and say, hey, I can say some type of opinion about the potential president-elect or whoever, and if I say the opinion and it sway you to vote a different direction, then I just, in theory, hacked you. And if I can get 15,000, that could sway in the whole entire election. So those are the type of things that you have to account for currently. And then you also have Cash App, right? So Cash App is now digital. You have your banking, Those financial things you have to protect as well. Those are big prominent items that you have to account for as well. For example, with Cash App, you have these different different ways in which, like for example, I say, hey, you win $1,000. Hey, enter in your Cash App account, and you may not think that it's just, you think it's just something that you're doing, but you prominently entered in your username and potentially can enter in your password, and somebody can hack your Cash account because you thought it was some type of contest that you won $1,000. So that's another way that you got to watch for it currently in this day and age.
Okay. And so I think you hit on a common topic there, a theme called phishing, where people are phishing for information from you. And I know presently I've heard of them doing this with Cash App. People have issues with Cash App, but Cash App doesn't have a customer service number. So people go in Google, they find a customer service number for Cash App and they call it. Unbeknownst to them, they're calling the hacker or someone who has ill will towards them, and they want to retrieve their Cash App information. And now they're funneling their money. And so I thought that was very interesting. It made me kind of withdraw from Cash App a bit, because we like our Amazon and our automated systems, and they're great when they work well, but I'm a little afraid of systems that don't have a human in the loop to correct it. And that's something I saw as an element here with Cash App. It's so reliant on the system that people are kind of become beholden to technology.
Yeah. Phishing is probably one of the most prominent ways to attack somebody. Like, it's probably at the top. And there's so many ways you can fish, right? You can fish through email. You can fish through Cash App. You can fish through email. Like, I always get these these messages from Nigeria saying, "Hey, you just won. My elder just died, and is your distant cousin, and we want to give you the money from your distant cousin." And a lot of times people may, fall for that and potentially give up some things like banking or other sensitive information that can allow them to get hacked.
That's a good point. I'm Walker at Amazon.com. So I get the spam emails for the entire Amazon for any Walker. If someone's trying to just fish, they say, "Huh, let's try Walker." And I'm Walker at. So I see all the phishing attempts for every Walker.
Yeah, last week, matter of fact, somebody sent me an email. It was actually a close friend. They sent the email saying, and they replied back to the email I sent them because I was sending them an email related to the community engagement, community activism. And they replied back, say, "Hey, yeah, man, I agree. Download this zip file." And I was like, download this zip file? And it was literally a real person that I just finished talking to. But what happened was a hacker hacked their account, and then they just replied back me trying to download malware, which is malicious software, to my computer so that my computer can get hacked, so that attacker will completely own my computer in a sense. That's what we call it.
And so I actually had a similar incident with my sister, was emailing me from her actual email. And so I have some ideas, but I'm curious, what can the public do to neutralize that kind of attack? It seems so sneaky. So like, what actions can you take that would help you not become a victim?
Yeah, so the first way to do that is do some type of antivirus on your computer. So a lot of times Gmail or Google, they can detect that type of, so when the person sent me a message a week ago, it actually showed up as malicious from Google. So Google has their own detection mechanism that they use. So use some type of reputable email client like Gmail, or wherever. The second thing is spelling. So a lot of hackers, for some reason, misspell a lot. And if you notice a lot of spelling errors, and you notice it's not the tone that your friend sent the message, then it's probably not your friend. You have to grow some concern around that. Another way is making sure that if you respond to an email, you know the person. So in the case where a person from Nigeria sent me a message, I didn't know who they were. And so I automatically knew that it was some type of phishing attack because this person was not a distant relative. It was somebody from Nigeria. Those are some common ways to understand. Last piece is know the policies of who you're contacting. So for example, a lot of attacks are from the IRS, but IRS does not reach out to you, right? So you're trying to get a refund check and then IRS say, hey, we got your refund check, but we need a fee of $100 so you can retrieve it. And they called you, then that's most likely some type of attacker because their policy is not to call anybody. You have to reach out to them. Okay. So yeah, that's another way of.
So I think you hit a good point there, which is what I did when it happened to me. I picked up the phone and called my sister and I said, hey, I'm getting emails from you and this doesn't sound like you. First, if this is you, how can I help as your brother? Because you've changed a little bit and I'm concerned. But, if this isn't you, then, let's first change your password on your account, and gave her some general guidance. Now let's go and see who else might have been contacted. And, not just myself, but right there are other people who maybe aren't as tech savvy or vigilant as me that she reached out to that have already tried to respond or could be going down the hacker's path already. So which brings me to a thing, made me think of two-factor authentication because, I had one data point, her email. So yes, I know this is her email and I'm receiving, but I chose to take another route to contact her. Yeah. And so can you elaborate on two-factor authentication since I just referenced it?
So two-factor authentication is finding multiple ways to authenticate somebody. So what it means by authenticate means I am who I say I am. That's what authentication is. So if I were to go to a bank, they may ask for, if I'm setting up a bank account, they may ask for my social security card and a driver's license. There's two ways in which I'm authenticating. So two-factor is that. So there's a couple of ways that you can, a lot of software companies now use two-factor authentication, especially banks. So they'll send you an email to say, hey, if you go through your email and answer the email, then yeah, you are true and Nunnally, but they also send you a text on your mobile device. So it's just in case somebody hacks your email, you still protected because they'll still send you a text. So that's where you'll see the text message code that comes up on your phone. There's two ways to authenticate. A lot of people may use thumb biometric, which is using your physical body, your eyeball, your retina scans, your fingerprints, that's biometric. So you may, show a security card or tap a security card against a buzzer to get logged in, but you also may have to enter a password, or you may enter a password and use your thumbprint. Those are all two-factor. My cell phone now allows me to enter my password and does facial recognition and facial detection to figure out that I'm Troy, even though I got an identical twin brother, so it don't work half the time.
So that's mostly, is that an iPhone, Android feature?
That's the iPhone 10 and greater.
Okay, and I think it's on Android as well. I have an iPhone 8, so I hadn't gotten there yet. Okay. You good?
Yeah. So yeah, that's two-factor authentication. So whenever you're just trying to download any software or even you're trying to go into a physical building, try to make sure that you have some type of authentication. That may be as simple as somebody seeing a receptionist knowing that you are Troy Nunnally, as well as buzzing in. There's two ways to authenticate. So make sure that you have, in a lot of cases, especially sensitive data, two-factor authentication.
So when I heard that, one thing that came to mind was it seemed to place more value even than previously on guarding your phone or guarding your email, because now my authentication with my bank is tied to receiving that code on my email. So seems like someone gets my email, like I say, my sister or your friend whose email was hacked then. So anything that we can do? I guess now it seems like we need to really focus on energy and effort on our devices and our email.
Yeah, yeah, devices for sure. Because this thing right here, this phone, is so vulnerable. It has so much information on it. I can access every single one of my social media accounts. I can access multiple bank accounts through this phone. It has stored credit card information. Um, and it is very, very, very vulnerable to different attacks. So you need to make sure that you have your simple stuff on, like your being able to enter your code, because if it gets stolen, then it's going to be a very bad situation. A lot of times what I would do is I'll enter in the code. It also has facial recognition. And also you put in Find My cell phone. So there's a lot of services. I have Find My iPhone that's provided by Apple. So just in case somebody steals it, I know that it's gone, and there's a service that I can even wipe the data off the cell phone remotely from another computer. So those are some services that you want to look into as well.
Okay. And I think as far as the email go, I would say, take your time, make sure you get a solid password. May not be the easiest to remember, but spend some time on it. Make sure it has some variety to it, capital letter, lowercase letter, numbers. And it also matters about your email provider. So I know Gmail does a pretty good job at using machine learning to know my patterns. So if I were to log in from a new device or new location, even it might say, hey, this is your computer, but it's somewhere I didn't think you had been on, so it say, hey, you're same device, but new location. So I would just say Google, I know in particular, is good about sending out those notifications. And so I would say, don't skip over them or ignore them. Take some time, 5 minutes, look at those emails and verify that that's an authorized login to your account, because it could now become much more detrimental. While you might not be concerned about someone getting into your email, if they can now use your email to get into your bank account, now we got to kind of going downhill there.
Yeah, and to add to that, as far as passwords is concerned, you'll ideally alphanumeric, so at least one alpha character, one number, capitalization, so at least one capitalized letter, as well as any special characters will help as well. It's exclamation point, question mark, something at the end. And then at least, I would say 10 to 12, at least 10 or 12. I would say 12 now. So at least 12 characters long on your email. And sometimes you'll remember just to help you remember it, because that can be really complicated as far as remembering. You may can attach it to an event that you had, or a rule of thumb, or some type of phrase that you commonly use. That's also. And then another way is there are now password management systems. That can allow you to be able to enter in your own one-time password, but then it'll go ahead and create this really complicated password for your Gmail, for your devices, for a lot of the software that you go in, like social media. It'll just have this 32-bit character, which is really hard to attack and hack.
Okay, any particular password managers that come to mind? I know for me, I use it in my iPhone by default. It already generates, but any for outside of what's built into iPhone or other devices?
1Password is my favorite. So there's a software called 1Password where you can enter in. It's a software that you download to your Mac and your Windows, and you can type in 1Password, and it will essentially create a whole bunch of other passwords for your different social media. Because the main problem is, if I hack one account, most likely you use that same password for every other account, if you're like me. So what 1Password is trying to solve is, if you hack one account, you don't get access to all these other accounts. And matter of fact, it's also secure, right? Because you create a password on your computer, but then it creates a more complicated password for your social media accounts. So,
Okay. Nice. And also just something simple. I've been meaning to look into 1Password, but just like most folks, it's on my to-do list. But I know my banking passwords, I spend more time and energy and effort on certain passwords. And then some I'm like, I'll go with this. My kind of, combination of 5 to 10 different passwords that, I'm like, oh, my fitness pal doesn't need to be that secure, and neither does this or that. And for me, it really helped when my fitness pal had a data breach, because I was like, yep, not really concerned with that password or the other accounts that I know might be associated with it, because I had already spent a little bit of energy and time saying these aren't at the same level of importance for my life, right? So I need my bank account secure. My fitness pal, okay, I gained a little weight and now you see it. No big deal. Okay. So yeah. So, and any other password manager you come to mind? I know you said 1Password.
Yeah, 1Password is my favorite. I also use just the Chrome browser. So the Chrome browser has a password management that I use often.
Oh yeah.
Safari has one, and like you said, if you have Safari, and it will connect to your Safari on your desktop as well as on your device itself. So now it syncs the password between different devices.
Okay, I noticed a new feature on Chrome about 3 weeks ago. I was going to log in on my account to some service, and it picked up that password, cross-referenced it with the Chrome password manager, and said, hey, you have 4 accounts whose password might be basically on the dark net or in some other data
I saw that
breach.
too. Yeah.
And I thought that was interesting. Do you know, outside of Chrome, any tool that the general public, or I don't know what that's called, and I hadn't had time to look into it, so I shared it. And I know I'd done it before through data breaches when I got monitoring service. But is there something off the top of your head that the general public can just do that kind of thing and, have a sense of how much of their data has been breached and where they should change passwords?
I think Chrome does it well. As far as I can't think of anything off the top as far as Chrome, but then there are tools that you can use to make sure everything is secure. So for example, if you're using the Chrome browser in Google, the problem with it is everything you type in the Chrome browser is tracked and is monitored. So one of the things that you can look into is making a more secure browser itself.
Okay.
So for example, DuckDuckGo is a browser that a lot of people use where their whole premise is, hey, we don't record anything. You also can use your browser in privacy mode to make sure that nothing is recorded at the browser level.
Okay.
Right, because you got browser level, but then you got your internet service provider who's also recording everything you do. So that's one way. So if you're trying to get at the internet service provider level, then you would need to download another tool, which is called the Onion Router, Tor.
Okay.
So it's Tor for short, but it's called the Onion Router. And what it allows you to do is, in a router, let me talk about router. So a router is the way in which the traffic of so if you visit a website, is how it is traveling through. It travels through multiple routers.
Another way I would phrase it is when Facebook says people you may know, that's the router. It determines who you might know and how those connections are formed. And just like you look at the friends you may know and say, we don't have strong connections, the router determines how strong connections are and which path through the network your data should go.
So routers are essentially connection points from A to B. So it may go through multiple routers. The problem is, as it go through these routers, it can be tracked. So the Onion network allows you to encrypt it, and everybody device, whoever installs the Onion network, they become a router themselves.
Okay.
So now I don't have to go through the internet service providers. I can just connect through multiple computers and have my internet connection that way. So that's very, very, very secure. A lot of hackers use that, and it's hard to track because you can't record that data. Like if I was if I was trying to prevent an attack from happening and trying to detect who you are as a hacker, it's hard for me to do that because now I can't even get access to your data because now it's on this very secure encrypted network, the Onion router. And you can download that on your computer.
Okay.
Today.
So you made me think of two things. The first is, what is encryption and why is it important overall? I'll let you go.
So the encryption is so when data is sent over a network, if it's not encrypted, it's sent what is called plain text. So it's readable data. So if it's not encrypted, then you will send let's say your password to Facebook. I can be sniffing the network. Like I can be looking at your data on this network and be able to read your password that's been sent to Facebook. And now I can hack into your system. So encryption allows you to jumble up the data, make it random in such a way where it's hard for me to read the data. It makes it not readable, as well as it keeps the integrity of the data. So if you're seeing that encrypted, jumbled up, random text, alphanumeric text to A to B, then even if I try to change it up, I don't know what I'm doing because it's encrypted, because it's random. But even if I try to change it, on the other end, it would know that somebody tried to change the data. So encryption also helps with integrity, making sure the data is what it is.
So kind of would Morse code be like a poor man's encryption?
Yeah, it would be. So yeah, so that's a good analogy. So if I don't understand Morse code and I send it to you and some other person don't understand it, then essentially I have encrypted data because they don't understand it, even though I'm having communication between you. You can encrypt it because you have the code on your end. You have the dots and the lines that translate back to characters. But if somebody don't have that code book, then they essentially can't read the data. So that is a good form of encryption.
Okay.
Well, not a good form, but it's
a
level.
It's a level.
It's
yeah.
a level.
It's kind of like writing a letter to the girl in high school that say, I want to take you out, and that's unencrypted versus telling your homeboy, tell her I want to holler. At least it's like, well, you can back off of that. Be like, oh no, holler meant something else or something. Yeah. Okay. And then the second thing that came to mind was public Wi-Fi networks when you mentioned that.
Yeah.
In hotspots, and I know that there's a huge potential security risk there. And I want to know if you can kind of speak to what that is and any kind of way that it could be mitigated or make the public aware.
Yeah, so a public network is a network where devices like my phone or somebody else's can connect to access the internet. And it may be devices that you don't know on the internet, right? It's public. Everybody, I may not know that your device is on the internet, so it's public. In a private sense, it's where I know all the devices that's on the internet. And in order to join this network, you have to enter in some type of password to connect. So it's where I know what's on the network. So in the public sense, since you don't really know what's on the network, then that is an issue, right? Because an attacker could potentially be sitting on a network sniffing your data. So we call it a data packet sniffer, which is essentially the data in which you're sending in chunks.
So eavesdropping.
So I'm essentially eavesdropping on your data. So I'm looking at what websites you're visiting. I'm looking at your passwords that you're in, your usernames and passwords that you're using. I'm looking at if you're going into bank accounts. I'm looking at all those type of things. And if you're not aware of that, it can be a very big issue. You can essentially get a lot of attackers attack most of their, play around and they'll do different network attacks on public networks.
So you made a good point that I hadn't thought about. When I think of public networks, I think of Starbucks or any of the big retailers, but essentially if I have my home network without a password on it, then it becomes a public network as well. Okay, so then I guess a recommendation to everyone would be to make sure you follow some kind of guide or 5 to 10 steps, of setting up your home router putting at some kind of password on it, and not password being the password, but something a little bit, you know,
Yeah.
a little bit more pizzazz.
Yeah. A story real quick. I was at a coffee shop. And the coffee shop was actually on it wasn't public in the sense because you have to go to the cash register to get the username and password. So it's like a private network in the coffee shop. It's still public to me because I don't know who devices are on there.
Okay.
However, so I'm just I'm in the coffee shop playing around on a network, and I was like, let me just type in the IP address of the router in my browser. So I type it in, it brings up the router, like the login for the router.
Okay.
So I was like, let me just type in admin.
I've done it.
As a username and password. And lo and behold, I was able to get into the router, have admin access to the router. And I thought, let me, because I had to get it quickly out because it's, I was supposed to be doing that. But that lets you know that, hey, you got to make sure that the networks that you're on, at least be cognizant that you need them see if you're sending any data and it's insecure data, or is it protected data or sensitive data that you're trying to send, then make sure that it's probably you should probably do it from a private network, especially if it's sensitive data.
So you say you were able to log in using admin. What kind of power did they give you?
Oh, they gave me all power. So now, so what that allows me to do, if I got router admin access, anybody in that coffee, I can change the password, of course, and lock everybody out of the network. However, if I have admin access to the router, then now I can look at every single person connected to the network and monitor all their devices, even if it's encrypted. So if you look at in your browser, like your Chrome browser, and you look in the upper left-hand corner, like in the URL you type in, it's typically a lock there, and that lets you know that it's encrypted. But even at the router level, I can have ways to hack that, right? I can have ways to still understand the data, even if the lock is there. It's called stripping, secure stripping, or SSL stripping is the term for it, which allows me to be able to remove the encryption and understand the data that you're using at the router level. So yeah, that's a very vulnerable.
Okay, so two things then. People should, one, when they set up their home network, make sure they put a password for anybody who wants to get on it.
Yep.
But two, once they set it up and get on it, they need to make sure they log into their router at least once and change the default username and password so that they don't forget in 6 months or a year and let someone get on and they forget about it and they can take control of it.
Yeah. And even at the router, at the Wi-Fi level, when you're setting up your secure network, then there's they give you a choice of what type of security you want to do. And a lot of people don't understand it. So for example, there's a WEP security, which is super, super vulnerable. So even if it's secure where you have username and password, I can hack into, or attacker, and I'm not an attacker, maybe ethically if somebody allows me to, but I'm not an attacker. But you can be able to hack into the network, even if you think that it is secure, like it has a WEP, which is very insecure. So if you're trying to figure out the security protocol that you're using, then I would do a WPA with the PSK. So that's a type of protocol to secure. So make sure you use the most recent security protocol that's on your Wi-Fi router, or the most secure.
Okay, so then just kind of wrapping up some takeaways are spend some time on your most vital passwords around banking and other services, and making sure you try and use some nice variety of capital letters, lowercase numbers, something that's more complicated than just password. And if you're having trouble with that, then you can use, like you say, 1Password or some other password manager, which will help you create a simple password that you can remember, but convert it to a more complex password for anybody who might try and hack your account. Then we discussed about social engineering, I would call it, which is phishing. falls in that category. And so be vigilant about the people you're communicating with, and reaching out to them and confirming if you have suspicions that it's not them, which led us to two-factor authentication. So on all your accounts, you should try and enable two-factor authentication, because at a minimum, you get alerted when someone's trying to access your account and can know before it's compromised or get locked out of your Instagram account or Facebook account or banking, that it's happening and that someone's trying to do it. And one thing we didn't hit on there is that becomes more important to your part about trying to hack elections, because if I can take over a digital profile and footprint of someone who actually exists, it makes whatever I'm telling someone more believable, because they say, oh, that's a real profile because they got 1,000 followers and they're following 1,000 people and they have posts, right? So it makes it more powerful than just trying to build a bot to do this. You mentioned malware. So having some kind of antivirus to help protect you against malware. And then I know we didn't touch on it, but another more common one in the past few years was ransomware, where they take your data.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
Ransomware. The city of Atlanta got hacked a couple of years back. I don't know if you remember.
I do recall.
And they sent a message. They literally hacked the entire city of Atlanta infrastructure, and they locked everybody out. And they said, hey, we will unlock your account if you don't give us $50,000.
Okay.
Well, some cities got hacked and gave the $50,000. They actually unlocked the account.
Okay.
But other ones,
trustworthy hackers.
That's very nice of you.
Hackers with morals.
But then city of Atlanta refused, and we're still having issues. It was years ago. It was like 3-4 years ago. We're still having issues today from when they did the ransomware attack to be able to lock your account in return for some type of monetary gain.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for your time. I think we have a few questions from the audience. I can't see that. Can you zoom in? I don't have my glasses. You all 1 second here. Can you?
Okay. Do Natalie Sharma. So the question is, with more accessible software at the fingertips of small businesses, owners feel more empowered to handle their technology on their own without a dedicated person or department. What are the most common security issues you see with this trend? That's a very good question, Natalie. There's a statistic that 75% of businesses do not have a security strategy. So what that means is, if you get hacked as a business, you don't know how to mitigate it. There's a likelihood you won't even know that you're hacked, just because your security, there's nobody there to kind of manage and monitor your security. So what you want to do first is be able to figure out a strategy in the cases where you are attacked, and just consult with maybe somebody like me, or even just do a real quick Google search on what I need to do in this case. That way you can mitigate it fast, because every second, when you're getting attacked, every second count. Also, like you said, one of the common security issues that is along the same points that we mentioned is insecure passwords and social engineering. Those are the 80% of attacks are those two items. So if you can just make sure that you're more secure and make sure that you are not being susceptible to any incoming phishing attacks that are occurring because of social engineering, then that's a big thing you need to do as well. Another issue that we see with this is that we need to just make sure that everything is just more secure physically. So if you have a brick and mortar, like in the building that we're in, there's multiple ways in order to authenticate. So we have to authenticate at the gate. We also have to authenticate at the doors, and just making sure that you have those type of items in place in order to make sure that you are not being attacked as far as physically as well.
Okay. Can you read the second question? I can't see. How secure?
So how secure is two-factor authentication as more corps and e-commerce companies are pushing users to use it? What's on the horizon for the bad guys? So two-factor authentication is one of the more secure forms. And the more different ways you can authenticate yourself, the better. So two-factor is just two forms, right? I authenticate two ways, but then you also have three-factor, three ways of authentication. You have four factors. So for example, in the bank, you have, in order to open a vault, you gotta have a two-factor from one person and two-factor from another colleague at the same time to open the vault. So if you're an e-commerce company, then those are some of the ways that are the more secure, just making sure that you use two-factor authentication, as well as even grow that even more to be multiple factor, 3 or 4 factor authentication as the information you're using become more and more sensitive. So what's on the horizon for the bad guys? Hacking Internet of Things. So I said at the beginning that 50 billion devices are on a network. Well, in 10 years, that would more than double. Then in 10 years, it'd be 125 billion because of this big push of Internet of Things. So since anything is connected to the internet, then it has the vulnerability to be hacked. Imagine being in a nuclear power plant, which has actually happened in Israel, where I was able to get in, if you were able to get into a network and just change the sensor level of the centrifuge that's handling the nuclear reaction. Well, that can cause a nuclear meltdown and affect millions. So those type of things, we're hacking into your Internet of Things devices, your sensors that are in your home, the sensors that are in traffic signals, as cities become more and more smart, those are on the horizon for bad guys. Bitcoin is a big one for bad guys as well. That's currently on the horizon as well. As Bitcoin, you don't necessarily, you can send money without knowing who sent it to who. So Bitcoin is a big one that bad guys use to transfer their money once it's been hacked.
Okay. The next question we have are, what are some browsers I can use if I don't want my activity tracked online? And I know you touched on that earlier with DuckDuckGo, was it?
DuckDuckGo is the biggest one that's used. So again, Tor, the Onion router browser. So if you look up Tor, the Onion router.
How do you spell that? Is that T-O-R, Tor?
Tor, yeah, T-O-R.
Okay.
T-H-E, onion, as I'm eating into an onion router. And the idea, it's called an onion because there's multiple layers of security that it uses, kind of like an onion. So being able to use that is a very big, is a very big browser that's commonly used today.
Okay. Our next question is, where could one start in cybersecurity from a computer engineering background? I think you touched on that a little bit because you had a electrical computer engineering background.
Yeah, so if I was in my shoes today, the choices I made 10 years ago may differ today. Back in the day, I went through schooling. So I did cybersecurity specialist at Georgia Tech. If I had to do it today, I would first Google cybersecurity classes on YouTube or put it on YouTube. And there's this really good one that's on Free Code Camp. So Free Code Camp is the username for YouTube. And they have a cybersecurity 14-hour ad-free cybersecurity class that you can take right now for no cost. Take that class and see if it's interesting to you. Then I would do some type of boot camp, which is Georgia Tech boot camp has a good cybersecurity course. If I do that, I will also do an online course as well. Udacity has a good cybersecurity InfoSec course that's taught by professors at Georgia Tech, and it's fraction of the cost. And maybe in some courses it's free, others it's like $50. So another one is certifications.
Okay.
CompTIA security is a popular certification. So CompTIA security plus. You also have the ethical hacker certification, just type ethical hacker certification, and you can do those as well.
Okay, nice. Next question is, how often should you change your passwords, and what are some tips when creating passwords?
So I would say change your password at least twice a year for sure. In companies, if you're working in a company, most likely they will have a change password 90 days. So they have their own policy where they'll say, hey, every 90 days, you need to change your password. So most companies do that. But if you're just a regular person, I would say at least every 6 months or so, change your password. In order to create a good password, at least 10 characters.
Okay.
Alphanumeric, which means you have some type of alphabet and a number, as well as a capitalization. So some type of capitalized alphabet. And the more random, the better. So if I let's say, I make a password, say, I love technology. Then I change the zeros to O's, the E's, and I love technology to 3's. I put an exclamation point at the end. I put 1, 2, 3, ABC, and just try to make it random as possible in such a way where you can remember it, but it's a very long password and hard for attackers to attack.
And one thing I actually do if there isn't a restriction is I use a sentence. So I get a capital letter, I can capitalize any word I want in the sentence, but it's a phrase that I can remember, and it hits on several of the things you just mentioned. So I get phrase for remembering, but complexity for making it secure. Okay. Is it safe to send account numbers, routing numbers, or any sensitive information over text?
Absolutely not. You shouldn't send any account information over text, especially if you don't know who the person is.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of banks don't even ask for your routing number initially. If you are sending a routing number, you have to be logged in. So you have to please use your username, use a password in order to log into a secure system, and then enter in account routing number or banking number. So for example, when I pay my student loans, even though I did have a full ride, I still took loans out. It was a bad financial decision. That's a different conversation. But I have to log in first and then enter in my account number. So please log in, make sure the connection is secure, and that's when you want to do it.
Okay. How do you protect yourself at public hotspots, or can you really protect yourself on those public networks? And I think you touched on it a little bit already.
Yeah, so if you're on a public network, well, make sure the public network is secure. Make sure if you want to be super secure, put your browser in privacy mode, or use a browser that's sending the data encrypted, as we talked about. So that means that if you look in the top left of the browser, make sure it has that lock. That HTTPS, so HTTP secure. Don't do it in HTTP, so if you type in www, make sure it has the lock at the top.
Okay, and that lock, is that the lock like where the address is over to the left?
Yeah.
Okay.
So when you type the address, it's immediately to the left of the address.
Okay. Then if a hotel gives me an ID to access the internet, is that a public network, or is it just for me in my room during my stay?
Depends. Well, first and foremost, anything that's not I will almost phrase that anything that's not at home is public, even if it's secure, just because you don't know which devices are on the network. So it depends on the cybersecurity professional, but I would deem that public still, just because I don't know which devices are hacking, that has potential to hack my own device.
Okay. I'm going to circle back to the other question and say another approach on the text messaging is always send critical information like username and password if it needs to be secure over 2 different mediums. So if you're going to text the username, email the password. That's, keep the data separated. So if someone does lose their phone, immediately looking in the text doesn't give someone complete access. So it's kind of like another poor man's form of 2-factor.
That's a great idea.
And then the last question I have here is, what are some good antivirus programs?
So antivirus, McAfee is probably the best one. Then you have Norton is another good one. So Norton, Norton, McAfee, McCafee. I might have misspelled it there. but then you also have the built-in ones if you're doing emails. So Google handles their own antivirus. Apple has somewhat of an antivirus built into its system as well.
Okay. And then I know there were a couple more questions on YouTube. I'll answer those offline with Dr. Nunnally. I thank you for your time today. It's a great conversation, good catching up.
It's a pleasure.
And thank you for assisting the Being Path.
Oh, thank you.